Imagine waking up in a city that doesn't care about your excuses. The sun hasn't risen yet, but someone is already checking your records. One clay tablet could decide if your family eats today or goes hungry tomorrow. There is no neutral. You are either useful, loyal, or in danger. If your taxes are late, a scribe will carve your name into wet clay, baked to survive longer than your house. If your neighbors murmur about unfair treatment, soldiers could be marching toward your gate before you finish your breakfast. If your god doesn't support the king, the priests will correct the story until he does. From the first empire of Akkad to the early pharaohs of Egypt, rulers didn't just seize power. They built invisible machines to hold it. Fear, reward, humiliation, religious authority, and psychological tricks kept millions in line. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Many of these methods are echoed in modern governments, corporations, even social media. The tools have changed, but the psychology has not. No one talks. No one dares. Every action is watched, measured, and interpreted. In the world's first empire, your entire life could be pressed into a piece of clay. One mistake, one misstep, and the consequences could ripple across your life for years. So, how did emperors keep control over millions across distant lands? How did they turn entire populations into obedient, measurable, and sometimes terrified cogs in a machine? Welcome to the Saturated Show, and welcome back to the Empire Timeline, from the first civilization to the last great war. Today, we count down 10 brutal ways ancient empires maintained power, from clay tablets and crushed rebellions to sacred propaganda and public terror. This isn't just about what rulers did to people. It's about what people allowed, and why. In previous episodes, we followed Sargon's rise, the unification of city-states under Akkad, and the intricate systems of taxation and governance that made the first empire function. We saw how cities became machines of control, with canals, walls, and temples shaping daily life. But Akkad wasn't alone. Ancient Egypt, Sumerian city-states, and other early kingdoms experimented with similar techniques, each adapting fear, surveillance, and loyalty tools to their culture. Now, we're zooming out. Across Mesopotamia and Egypt, empires discovered the same principle: measure, manage, and manipulate. By controlling records, armies, resources, gods, and even festivals, rulers built systems where survival, loyalty, and obedience were inseparable. Today, we're going deeper than walls or taxes. We'll count down 10 brutal ways empires kept power, uncovering the psychological, logistical, and occasionally chilling techniques behind ancient authority. In Akkad, scribes were the empire's veins. Every harvest, every animal, every laborer's contribution was recorded on clay tablets in cuneiform. Scholars suggest that entire families' lives could be traced through these tablets. One could argue it was the ancient equivalent of an indestructible spreadsheet. You can't delete, modify, or hide from it. Egypt mirrored this system. Grain collected from the Nile's floods was carefully measured, stored in royal granaries, and recorded by scribes who formed a powerful middle class. Missing grain wasn't a minor inconvenience. It was a sign of disobedience, and sometimes the first step toward punishment. Imagine being a farmer, your children hungry, your fields worked to exhaustion, and a scribe constantly marking what you owed. The government remembered your debt better than your own family, and it wasn't just numbers. Officials could see patterns, predict rebellions, and decide which cities needed extra oversight. This system was terrifyingly effective. Scholars think that by reducing humans to numbers, empires could manage millions without ever meeting them. Ancient rulers discovered a truth that still holds today. If you can measure people, you can control them. Modern analogy. It's like an unerasable credit score, combined with a government database that updates every time you blink. Could you behave differently if every minor mistake, missed work, unpaid taxes, a neighbor's complaint, was carved into a record meant to outlive you? Across both Mesopotamia and Egypt, data was power. Life in clay meant that your daily survival depended on precision and compliance. It's one thing to farm. It's another to be a permanent entry in a growing ledger of empire. Empires don't just rely on law, they rely on the constant presence of force. In Akkad, city militias evolved into professional, loyal armies. Garrisoned troops in key towns ensured that rebellion was never far from consequences. These soldiers were often outsiders, men from distant lands, less likely to sympathize with local populations. Their loyalty was to the emperor, not the village. Scholars suggest this method minimized collusion and rebellion. Early Egypt used similar tactics. Pharaohs maintained elite troops and personal bodyguards, visible reminders of authority. Imagine walking past a river in ancient Egypt and seeing soldiers camped beside the fields, their spears glinting in the morning sun. Villagers knew, misstep, and these men could act instantly. This is where power stops being abstract and becomes concrete. Armies are not just defenders, they are reminders. Empires understood that fear is more reliable than loyalty when multiplied across thousands of people. Modern parallel. It's like a boss who can send a "you're fired" email via horseback. You never know when it arrives, but you obey anyway. Would you rather have a cruel local king you know, or a distant emperor who has eyes everywhere and knows exactly how much grain you owe? The choice is terrifyingly simple. Armies kept people busy, compliant, and perpetually aware of their place in the empire. Not glorious, not heroic, just frighteningly efficient. Executions, mutilations, and the symbolic tearing down of city walls were not merely legal acts. They were carefully staged performances. Scholars suggest that the message was deliberate. Everyone who witnessed a rebellion's suppression learned two things: obedience and fear. Inscriptions and later texts boast of kings who crushed uprisings. Villagers watched fields burn, walls collapse, and neighbors vanish. In later empires like Assyria, this became extreme, but the principle remained. Punishment was most effective when it was public, visible, and unrelenting. Imagine a small town square where justice was performed like theater. The soldiers were actors, the king a director, and every citizen an audience member internalizing the consequences. Silent rebellions died before they even started. Modern analogy. The ancient version of social media. "Look how badly I punished them" posts. Even if you weren't involved, you understood the power dynamics, the risks of defiance, and the importance of loyalty. How many quiet rebellions die in the head before one even attempts action? History, scholars argue, is filled with people who complied not out of love, but out of fear, a lesson that echoes to this day. A subtler form of control involved children of rival rulers. Taken to the palace as guests or wards, they were educated, observed, and psychologically influenced. Scholars think this built loyalty while keeping threats neutralized. Imagine a boy torn between love for his family and the empire that raises him. He learns the court's values, the emperor's power, and the subtle cues of obedience. In a way, it was a soft kind of brutality, no harm inflicted, but loyalty cultivated. Modern parallel: elite scholarships or education programs that integrate future leaders into a central system. They learn, adapt, and often forget the alternative, their urge. This technique kept empires safe from succession crises and rebellion, creating a generation that felt connected to the empire more than to local or familial loyalties. Access to food and water has always been power. In Mesopotamia, irrigation canals controlled water flow. A blocked canal could mean a famine. In Egypt, the Nile's floods dictated planting and harvest cycles. Central storage and famine relief were tools of loyalty and compliance. Picture villagers standing in line at a granary, officials checking lists, weighing grain, and determining who ate today. Scholars think controlling sustenance ensured obedience. When rulers decide who survives a drought, survival becomes politics. Modern analogy: food stamps, rationing systems, or centralized aid programs, but magnified to entire populations. Loyalty and survival become intertwined. When the person who rules you also controls your next meal, is that obedience, loyalty, or pure survival instinct? Kings and pharaohs didn't just rule through force, they ruled through belief. In Akkad, Sargon presented himself as chosen by the gods. Later, Naram-Sin declared himself divine. In Egypt, pharaohs were living gods, sons of Ra. Religious obedience and civil obedience intertwined. Temples, hymns, and festivals reinforced the message. Scholars note that the repetition created internalized loyalty. Even the skeptical worshipped because it was impossible not to participate. Modern analogy: imagine your president's business card reading "half God." Citizens wouldn't just follow orders, they would police themselves. The most efficient prisons, history shows, are invisible ones built inside the mind. Empires encouraged loyalty by dividing populations. Reward some cities or elites with land, tax relief, or privileges. Punish others with destroyed walls, fines, or military oversight. Result: citizens blame neighbors, not rulers. Scholars argue this was an early form of divide and rule. It created social cohesion in fragments and minimized collective action. Modern analogy: loyalty programs or targeted incentives, but for entire populations. Continuous campaigns served multiple purposes. The army remained loyal, nobles stayed occupied, and citizens focused on external enemies. Scholars suggest that peace was dangerous. Attention on internal issues could spark rebellion. War as distraction, pride, and control, the trinity that kept empires functioning. Monuments, inscriptions, and scribes didn't just record events, they curated perception. Lost battles were erased, victories exaggerated. Scholars suggest history itself became a tool of control. Modern parallel: PR campaigns, media spin, and history they tell you versus history they hide. How much of what we know as history is just good PR that survived the centuries? Festivals, common gods, public works, and civic rituals created belonging. Citizens didn't just obey, they participated. Pride, ritual, and identity made leaving emotionally difficult. Scholars argue this soft power was as brutal as swords, control without violence, consent without choice. When a system can make you sing while it squeezes you, that's real power. So how did ancient empires really hold control? They counted you, they watched you, they fed or starved you, they terrified or comforted you, they wrote the story, cast themselves as gods, and invited you to applaud. Some tricks feel old: clay tablets, armies, stone monuments. But the psychology? Uncomfortably modern. Next time, the Empire's timeline takes you away from palaces and battlefields into the streets of the first great cities. Everyday life, farmers, shopkeepers, servants, and slaves navigating systems built by kings and gods, often without even realizing it. Hit subscribe if you haven't already, and follow as we walk through the ancient world, uncovering the lives of those who built, endured, and shaped empires. The history they told you is only half the story. The saturated show is here for the rest.